Just 2 years ago, oil was selling for more than $115 a barrel. It recently dropped to just under $30, a 12-year low. And there's no consensus on what will happen next. Could this downward trend continue, or will prices steadily increase in the months ahead? In the meantime, the impact is being felt across the globe, from Saudi Arabia to Russia, China, India, Venezuela, and the United States. We begin with CCTV Correspondent Yasser Hakim for an update on what's happening in the oil-rich Gulf states. He joins us from Cairo. And Yasser, what is the impact so far on falling oil prices in the major oil-producing Gulf states, countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Kuwait?
Yes, these countries, Anand, depend heavily in their income on oil production and oil sales. They've been hit by $360 billion loss of revenues in 2015. Budget deficit has now reached 21.6%. 2016 is forecast to be around 19.1%. And they know that although this low has happened before, the low prices before a decade or more, but this time could be different. This time it could stay for a while, and that's why they've taken measures. For the first time, you would see that they have reduced subsidies on energy. They have raised fuel prices and electricity prices in these countries. They have issued and established new taxes for the first time. Taxes on land, taxes on income in the Gulf states, things that have never been heard of in these states before. And also, they have devalued their currency by 2 to 3% against the dollar. So they're bracing for maybe some kind of a long-term vision, trying to decrease expenditure to manage to go through these storms of low oil prices. Anand.
Now, what about efforts to perhaps get the price going in the other direction, going up? I mean, there's a big oil cartel, OPEC. Most of these countries belong to OPEC. What do the member states want?
There's a lot of divisions concerning this issue. The Gulf states, the major contributors of OPEC, they want to keep the production as it is. They don't want to reduce production so that price goes up. They want to keep the levels as they are so that they can maintain some kind of income and revenue. Other countries, you've got the Latin American countries, Nigeria, they want to go to reduce, but they are suffering more than the Gulf Arab states. The Gulf states have considerable savings that can help them maintain this kind of level of production without needing to reduce production and increase prices at this point. And they feel that maybe there might be a slight change or adjustment of prices by the end of the year. That's what we know from OPEC ministers in the last couple of days, saying they might adjust the prices, increase the production by the end of the year. But right now, they're keeping it as it is, hoping that this will kick out, if you might say, from the market countries that are non-OPEC prices or high-cost producers, and to keep the market only for the OPEC producers to control the prices and the production later on. And you have to remember that Iran will be into the market very soon now that the international embargo is being lifted. So that's another producer and more supply in the market.
Thanks, Yasser. That's CCTV's Yasser Hakim reporting from Cairo. And for more now, joining me here in the studio is Abdulateef Al-Mulhim. He is a columnist for the Saudi newspaper Yaum. Also joining us from London is Keyu Jin. She is a professor at the London School of Economics. She specializes in international economics and the Chinese economy. And from Houston, we're joined by Carl Larry. He is an expert on the oil industry and is a director for Frost and Sullivan, an oil and gas consulting company. Welcome to all of you to the show. Abdulateef, let me start with you. Saudi Arabia is the world's largest oil exporter. Oil accounts for something like 80% of the country's budget revenues. So how is the falling oil price going to affect the country?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. For the time being, the fall of the oil prices are not having a very, very severe impact on Saudi Arabia. If it continues at this price, $25 a barrel, it will take about 2 years before we would feel the difficulty of the low prices. At this time, no. Maybe there are some projects being delayed or being held, which are not time necessary for the country. So right now everything so far so good.
So Saudi Arabia can sustain this kind of price for another 2 years, you say?
Yes. This is my presumption.
All right, let's look at the other side of the equation. China is the world's second largest oil consumer. Keyu Jin, what do these falling prices mean for China?
Well, actually, not a whole lot is the answer. Part of it because actually countries like China and India, what happens is that there are a lot of government-financed subsidies to oil prices to keep them down for consumers. So when oil prices peaked, there were a lot of costs for subsidies, and these governments have been trying to cut them down somehow. So right now, what is happening is simply that the subsidies are going down, but consumer prices are not changing so much. And also, secondly, part of the fall in oil prices has a lot to do with demand. So the fact that China's demand for oil might be, in a grand scale, falling back a little bit because they're shifting away from industrial production more to consumption also has something to do with it. So I have my doubts as to how much that would actually benefit China.
But China's oil demands this year will increase, wouldn't it? According to the China National Petroleum Corporation, it will go up by something like, what, 4.5%, 4.8%?
Right. I mean, I think that we still have to distinguish between, a lot of the production structure that is shifting away and the fact that you have more consumption and, embedded in consumption goods are still, oil prices are still an intermediate good. So that's possible. But still, it's not going to affect the final consumer prices by much, precisely because there were a lot of subsidies in the first place, and these subsidies are simply going to be cut back. But oil prices related products won't change by much in terms of prices for Chinese consumers.
Carl, let's look at the situation in the United States. Well, of course, motorists are very happy, cheap gas at the pumps, but the United States is also a producer of oil, and it's now producing at its highest level in something like 30 years. At the same time, of course, the price per barrel, as we know, is going down. So how does this affect U.S. oil producers?
Well, I think it's going to be a struggle at the start of the year, but at some point we're really going to have a whole different revolution of industrial production here. The last 2 years we set a demand record for refineries for crude, just over 16 million barrels a day. So that production is getting used, but now the game changer is that we're allowed to export it. So it could become something where we're the largest producer, the largest consumer, and possibly a chance to become one of the largest exporters.
But what about the cost of producing each barrel of oil? Is it more expensive than the cost to sell it right now?
Well, the cost changes. It depends a lot on location, but what's really changed is a lot of technology. We've seen a lot really happen in the past year that's almost cut a lot of the margins in half, or production margins in half, and been able to keep some of the producers, especially in the Gulf Coast area, viable. So there might be a lot of activity in the M&A space this coming year, but we're going to see production remain around 9 million barrels a day, maybe even grow if we can start exporting.
Abdulateef, I was looking at some figures here on just to indicate how reliant Saudi Arabia is on oil. Oil makes up 45% of the country's GDP, 90% of its export earnings. Has Saudi Arabia been over-reliant on oil?
To be frank, yes, we are over-reliant on oil production. But before I go on, I would like to make comments on what the other guests have done. First of all, you have to look at oil like a swimming pool. Either you produce it in the United States or in Saudi Arabia or Russia or anywhere else. Swimming pool is like if you take from the diving board area or the ladder area, it's the same. So whatever is being produced in the United States is going to have the same effect being produced in Saudi Arabia. Also, the United States are still producing at such a low price because at many times the American economy is giving a lot of interest money for oil producing companies in the United States, and they are technically using what they have right now. But what really surprises us in Saudi Arabia is that the fall of the oil prices is going against many odds, like questions being asked. Why the United States is exporting oil when it's the prices of oil barrel is very low at a time when they didn't allow it till maybe 2 or 3 years ago when the price of oil was 140 barrels a day. So everything right now in the oil market is simply going against every single economic analyst. So right now many people are asking questions like, why the economic or the world is not taking advantage of this era when low oil price is being technically all over the world, like airlines, stuff like that. It's very confusing. But the questions we always ask: why is it Saudi Arabia? We read in one page in the Western press that Saudi Arabia is actually bringing the price of oil at very low point. At the same time, next day you would see papers in the same Western press saying that Saudi Arabia is not having the same influence they had in the oil market, and they are not the main swing producer right now.
But the cost of producing oil is not the same, is it? Saudi Arabia, it costs Saudi Arabia something like $10 to produce a barrel of oil.
Sometimes it costs less. This is what
right, and it costs a country like the United Kingdom. Yeah. In excess of $40.
Exactly. This is why we are surprised that the price of oil is going down at a time when there is like total economic unrest and total instability in many of the producing countries like Libya, Iraq, and Nigeria. Right now, the price of oil is going against all odds of any economic analyst. But this is why you have to look at the oil production, no matter what, as like a swimming pool. And right now, by the way, Saudi Arabia is doing a policy that is for the interest of the Saudis and Saudi Arabia. And we are not against shale oil. We are not against any country that produces oil. But there is a great oil production from non-OPEC members, but everybody is looking at the OPEC members and mainly Saudi Arabia.
Okay, Keyu, one of the biggest bills that emerging countries have to pay is, of course, their energy bill, paying for oil. Now that the price is going down, are we going to see growth in these countries?
Well, we haven't seen anything like growth yet. And we also have to distinguish among emerging markets because there are oil exporters and there are also oil importers. So for oil exporters, that's a pretty difficult time to come. But some countries are able to adjust better because they have financial and oil reserves, and some are able to adjust better because they have a floating exchange rate. And here, Saudi Arabia, has a peg to the dollar, so it's a little bit more rigid. So those that have flexible exchange rates have been faring better. As for the oil importers, I think that one of the things that we have to realize is that the global paradigm has shifted from the past, which is that oil prices are no longer major drivers of global business cycles anymore. And we have to reconcile with the fact that because of shale technology and other new sources of energy, that this kind of global arrangement is changing. So also, thirdly, a lot of the effect is also coming from a global collapse in demand. So there are demand and supplies effect to the declining oil prices that we are observing.
And Carl, what are the other factors that have caused oil prices to drop?
Well, I think when you talk about the economies of the world, this is something that's a very big deal right now. The U.S., obviously, we still import about 7 million barrels a day of crude, so there is some of that, but most of it we're starting to import. We're seeing from Canada. We've increased our imports from Canada and their crude by nearly triple over the past 6 years. So, when you look at what's going on in North America, Canada, United States, and Mexico, and even down to Latin America, you're seeing some economies that are being buoyed by these low oil prices. But around the rest of the world, they are feeling that shock of not making money on the exports and still having problems trying to operate on the low cost of oil. But it's a global contagion right now that we're seeing across the world's economies, and the U.S. is growing, but just not fast enough to keep everybody up.
Right, Abdulateef, you mentioned OPEC just a moment ago. We have oil-producing countries like Venezuela, Nigeria, calling for OPEC to get its act together, cut production, push prices up.
Well, as I said, the influence of OPEC is not having the same impact they used to years ago.
Why not? Is there a lack of unity?
No, not lack of unity, but there are other places in the whole world that are producing oil. Also, the technology of finding oil is very advanced. In the past, you would do hit and run, and you are losing money in just finding the oil. But right now, the technology is so advanced that there are many places are looking for oil that they are actually matching OPEC. Venezuela economy is different from Saudi Arabia because of the oil production ratio from producing the oil and to exporting it. So it's very difficult to say, to compare Saudi Arabia and Venezuela.
Is there a fear on the part of some OPEC countries that if they cut production, they will lose their customers?
It's very hard to tell. For example, we have seen a very political activities in the Middle East. We have seen the Chinese presidents, many other world leaders coming to Saudi Arabia. This could be part of it, because of the oil. What really surprises me is that China is not taking advantage or more advantage of the oil, the oil prices, that they could boom their economy. And when the Chinese economy, with its massive size, like China and India, they are not moving things as fast as we expected. So talking about OPEC right now, it's very difficult. Much more difficult than in the past. If OPEC members do reduce the amount of oil, as I said, it's a swimming pool.
Right. Keyu, is that the case? Countries like China and India not taking advantage of this low oil price to grow their economies?
Well, to be frank, China's economy is not growing not because of oil, but because of other kind of major distortions in the economy and in a transition phase. But as I was saying, the oil price trickling down really actually onto consumer prices is going to be very limited, precisely because government is simply cutting back the subsidies.
What about those countries where, as I mentioned, it's producing a barrel of oil is very high? Canada, the United Kingdom. How long will they be able to sustain these losses? Because if they're producing at above, $27 a barrel, they're losing all the time, aren't they?
Absolutely. I think that, this is going to persist for a while, because let's note that the global investment in oil has been cutting back. And this year, 2015, has fallen by $150 billion. So for the time for this to trickle into prices, to increasing prices, really takes time. So it will be some time before oil prices start to climb up, in my view. So potentially for these countries, it's a matter of at least maintaining a certain market share. So they're going to have to, make some losses for some time to come.
And Carl, what kind of effect does the oil price have on investment plans by energy producers in the United States? Will they cut back? Are we going to see workers being laid off?
I think there's a shift of workers here in the oil industry. We've seen a lot of producers who employed a lot of labor, shifting a lot of that labor to the downstream side, where you see refinery production really at its highs and actually expansion going on right now. So the labor force has been mitigated a little bit from the oil shock. But I do think that there's room for growth here. I think that investment's starting to look at this and saying this $25, $30 barrel of oil is about the bottom of what we're going to see as it goes up here, albeit slowly. I think that there's going to be room for investment, and we're going to see a lot of activity this coming year.
And are we going to see more growth in that sector where people are looking for alternative sources of energy? There's wind technology, there's solar technology now coming online. Are we going to see more of that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what we're really trying to focus on here now. It's not about increasing production; it's about increasing efficiency. And with that, that's where we're seeing a lot of the newer technology focused on, trying to find ways to bring out barrels smarter rather than more barrels, as a number.
Keyu, when do you think oil prices will recover? When will there be this turnaround? When will prices start going up?
No, I think that the more compelling views I've gotten is, they'll start to climb up, by 2020 to $60 a barrel.
So we're going to see these kind of prices for what, another 5 years, 4 years?
Potentially.
What do you think, Carl?
I think we'll probably see them start to rise Q2 this year, into Q3. I think that probably around the end of the year, we'll probably average about a $45, $50 barrel of oil. We'll probably see higher sometime during the year. I think there's a lot still at risk out there in the world that keep prices higher, and then probably $60 by next year.
What do you think, Abdulateef?
I think the price will go up a little bit faster. I would say in this year it will increase very slowly, but price of oil is going to increase eventually because it's depleted energy. It's not renewable, and I hope it will go up sooner than later.
But should we be looking for some indicators of when it goes up? I mean, what are the benchmarks that we should be looking for?
Well, most of the oil price increase and decrease are technically psychological. But as I said, it's the first time that things are going against all logical analysts. For example, when the Iranian embargo was, the Western embargo was lifted by on Iran, Iran immediately declared that they would produce between 500,000 to 1 million barrels a day, which is yes, it's nice news, but in reality it's very hard to do it. To increase your capacity to half a million barrels per day, it needs years of preparations and billions of investments of infrastructures. This is why a single Western oil company is technically looking at Tehran for this.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there for this segment. Abdulateef Al-Mulhim, Carl Larry, Keyu Jin, thanks to all of you for joining us.